One of the best things about living in Yorkshire is having amazing countryside on your doorstep. And Huddersfield is no different for that. We're extremely lucky. Now there are woodlands, fields, streams, rivers, and lots of wildlife, including lots of farm animals, including lovely woolly sheep and big old cows. Now, this is Fenay Beck behind me. I hope you can just see it in shot. And this is a very, very small stream which runs between Shepley and the River Colne around Bradley. It's about 19 kilometres long, and it changes name several times along its way. It starts off as Shepley Dyke. It becomes Thunder Bridge Dyke. That turns to Fenay Beck and Woodson Beck. Then it becomes Roundwood Beck and Lees Beck, before running into the River Colne near Bradley, passing through Dalton along the way. Like many streams and rivers in the United Kingdom, Fenay Beck has been profoundly affected by human activity. Around about 14% of streams and rivers in this country are deemed ecologically adequate because they're usually overly polluted. Reports suggest that Fenay Beck is not overly polluted, however has been heavily modified by human activity. The Yorkshire Wildlife Trust started a year-long project in 2018 called Restoring Fenay Beck, which aimed to bring the very best out of the biodiversity and the potential of wildlife living around this kind of environment. Reports were done on behalf of the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, including by the Wild Trout Trust, the Calder and Colne Rivers Trust. And they did a very in-depth investigation all the way back from Dalton all the way up to Shepley to investigate the biodiversity of Fenay Beck and to see what could be done to perhaps improve it. They found that human activity, including the construction of weirs and flood defences, particularly near Fenay Bridge and Dalton, had a profound effect on the stream itself and its biodiversity. Now, why may that be a problem, you ask? Weirs in particular actually inhibit the movement of fish and other invertebrates in the river, in the stream. It stops them from moving from one place to another. Now, often fish actually migrate, for example, to mate with other fish. So if you restrict this, you're actually creating a very, very limited gene pool, which of course is no good for the species survival itself. Similarly, the raw elements that actually create and regenerate habitats are often blocked by things like weirs and flood defences. Things like silt or sand may be stopped from flowing further downstream and building and regenerating those habitats. Similarly, another man-made problem in Fenay Beck is signal crayfish. Now, signal crayfish, again, you may ask, what does that have to do with people? Signal crayfish were introduced to the UK around about the 1970s as an alternative to lobster, something that could be farmed and consumed in restaurants and be bought in shops. Unfortunately, what has happened is that these crayfish, much larger crayfish, have outcompeted the native white-clawed crayfish and have actually spread disease to them, including a fungal plague that many of them carry, although remain unaffected by. So that is a problem that has been introduced by humans. There's no evidence that removing them from the river will have any great effect in the wider United Kingdom. So they are a problem that we've created that we're unable to kind of tidy up right now. The report by the Wild Trout Trust suggested areas for improvement along Fenay Beck, despite stating that pollution levels were not particularly high. Now let's go and have a look at a particular area for improvement. A great deal of work has been going on down near Thunder Bridge by the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust since the start of 2018. In fact, some of the ways that they've looked to improve the biodiversity of Fenay Beck and to manage the stream in an ecologically friendly way has been to introduce new fences, new flood hurdles, and to cut back potentially invasive weeds and erosive weeds on the riverside, as well as introducing more signage and interpretation boards for walkers and people who are out in the countryside, so they can see and appreciate what kind of wildlife is around them. Right now, I'm right next to Dogley Nature Reserve. Now, Dogley is, if you don't know, between Fenay Bridge and Kirkburton, and the nature reserve itself used to be the site of a small old sewage works. Now, that's all gone today, and it's a place of vibrant wildlife. It's an extremely vivacious place and a lovely place to have a little stretch of your legs around. But one of the things highlighted in the Wild Trout Trust report as an area of improvement for managing Fenay Beck was here. Now, this is an area, as you can see, where there's a small cliff, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of grass hanging over it, over the edge. Now, that's clearly something which is quite vulnerable to erosion, and part of that is due to livestock grazing in the field, and cows being able to get down to the riverside very, very easily. Now, you might think that's not a big problem. If a bit of a cliff falls off, that's okay. But it's the byproduct of cows themselves which actually causes a big problem as well. Now, something called agricultural runoff was listed in the report as being a potential pollutant for Fenay Beck, although it is not, as I stressed before, a majorly polluted stream. Of course, in cows where there are livestock, there's quite a large amount of manure, and quite often this can run off into the water and pollute it during heavy rainfall. Of course, this is a prime example of where that could happen. Now, one thing that obviously hasn't been done here, but could be done in the future, that was suggested in the report as a potential solution, was to add something called a buffer. Now, an agricultural buffer is basically a strip of land, a very small, thin strip of vegetation. So it could be trees or hedges, or it could be a thicker strip of grass that would just run along here and around as the stream starts to meander. And that would be an excellent way of actually stopping any potentially polluting chemicals reaching the water, even if they are organic and natural polluting chemicals. There's no doubt that we're very lucky to have groups like the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust looking out for the biodiversity of our natural habitats like Fenay Beck. In fact, restoring Fenay Beck was a project that hoped to bring great crested newts, water voles, otters, brown long-eared bats, soprano pipistrelle bats, and many, many more animals and many, many more aquatic invertebrates to this area. But is there more that needs to be done? Having seen the potential for improvements that perhaps haven't been worked on, is there more that should be done? And will we start to see the wildlife I've just listed out in the open more often? Or will this be a problem that we need to address more deeply?